So how many people here were in the audience when our founder, Dylan Taylor, first announced what we were doing at NewSpace 2017? Not that many. Interesting. Well, I was in the audience as well, and that was the first time that I heard about Space for Humanity. And he shared what we were doing, and I was so inspired by it that I went and I approached him afterwards. And it was after that conversation that now has me leading the organization today. So my name is Rachel Lyons. I have a background in aerospace engineering. I'm the former vice chair of the board of directors of SEDS, Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, and I am now the executive director of Space for Humanity. So to start, I'm going to go back about 51 years to a story that we are all very, very familiar with. When we first went around the moon and we saw the Earth for the first time from that perspective. The image was called Earthrise, and what I later learned, I knew it was something very monumental for us as a civilization, and it was only until I watched a video at the Long Now Foundation, Benjamin Grant, who founded something called the Daily Overview. He was speaking about this image, and what he said really struck me because I didn't know it before. He said that this image, historians say that this image sparked the environmental movement. And I know there's a ton going on at that time, late 60s, early 70s, but the evidence that points to that is that within 3 years, the Environmental Protection Agency was founded. Earth Day was founded. A number of the leading organizations in the environmental movement were founded. Doctors Without Borders was founded, and without borders, that phrase did not exist before we saw the Earth from that context. And a number of acts specifically for preserving land and resources on Earth were started as well. And so seeing the Earth from that context really started something big for our world. And then 2 years later, Carl Sagan came out with Cosmos, and I share this because I'm such a big Carl Sagan fan, and because this, in my personal story, has been very impactful. Because it's because of his work that then a few decades later, Neil deGrasse Tyson came out with his Cosmos. And so that brings me to my personal story. In my whole life, I actually never had an interest in space until I was 19 years old. And it was then that a friend of mine insisted on showing me this documentary, Cosmos. And in that first episode, Neil deGrasse Tyson shows the scale of the universe in space and in time. And I went from having my own little worldview of me and my friends and my family and my community, whatever, to this something so much bigger. And seeing how miraculous our existence is and how, at the same time, how meaningless it was, really changed my perspective. It changed the way that I related to people, and it changed the way that I related to living on this planet. And I just became obsessed with space. So I got involved with everything I possibly could space. I switched to aerospace engineering. I joined SEDS USA, and I went to the Space Vision conference a few months later. And at the Space Vision conference, there was a ton of people speaking. There was, I heard about asteroid mining and space doctors and space lawyers and all of these crazy projects that I'd never heard of before. But of all of them, the most impactful was Frank White, who spoke about the overview effect. And so who here is familiar with the overview effect? Okay, like 50% maybe? That's interesting. So the overview effect is the cognitive shift in worldview that occurs to astronauts when they go to space and they experience our planet from space. And time again, these astronauts come back down with a completely new understanding of everything that's happening on our planet, from the environment to politics, to even just their place in their local communities. And so here's a few notes from astronauts. So here's a German cosmonaut saying, "Before I flew, I was already aware of how small and vulnerable our planet is, but only when I saw it from space, in all its ineffable beauty and fragility, did I realize that humankind's most urgent task is to cherish and preserve it for future generations. And here's a NASA astronaut saying, it's hard to explain how amazing and magical this experience is. First of all, there's the astounding beauty and diversity of the planet itself, scrolling across your view at what appears to be a smooth, stately pace. I'm happy to report that no amount of prior study or training can fully prepare anybody for the awe and the wonder that this inspires. And then a Syrian astronaut saying, from space I saw Earth, indescribably beautiful, with the scars of national boundaries gone. And I always read these, and obviously I think about the overview effect all the time, and I read things from astronauts all the time. And every time, like, I just love to presence myself to just, like, how profound it truly is to see the Earth from space. And then here's Anusha Ansari, who I was speaking to Lisa Rich 2 or 3 days ago, and she was saying that Anusha Ansari, she went to space more than 10 years ago, and she still speaks at events 3 times a week at least, sharing her experience with people. And she came back and she started a number of initiatives specifically to get women and girls into STEM. And then Eugene Cernan, who says, you don't see the barriers of color and religion and politics that divide this world. You wonder, if you could get everyone in the world up there, wouldn't they have a different feeling, a new perspective? And this reminds me of a conversation that I had with astronaut Scott Parazynski a few months ago. And he said that when he returned to Earth, he was working on initiatives specifically to get political leaders into space, because he saw how important that perspective was for people who are leading in our world. And so I became really, really, really fascinated by the astronaut experience and by the overview effect. So I started doing research and looking into it. And I came across studies from the University of Pennsylvania Psychology Department, being led by a researcher named David Yaden. And he said that there are 3 things that characterize the astronaut experience. And the first is the appreciation and perception of beauty. The second is unexpected and even overwhelming emotion. And the third is an increased sense of connection to people and to the Earth as a whole. And underlying all of it is the emotion of awe. And awe, the definition, is a feeling of reverential respect mixed with wonder. So it's awe and it's wonder. And he also says that people in space he describes us as awe junkies. And so awe is induced with 2 things, according to his research. The first thing is vastness, so feeling like you're part of something greater than yourself. And then the second is accommodation. So feelings of awe, it forces you to reframe your current mental schema. So it basically makes you present to things that aren't part of your structures, your brain structures, and causes you to reframe what you already know. And people who experience awe more often, actually, it's also linked to greater life satisfaction, to more pro-social behavior, so taking actions that benefit the collective rather than yourself as an individual. And deep feelings of awe are actually one of the key components in a sudden and enduring personal change. So I was reading a really interesting study that David Yaden pointed me to, and it was about quantum changes. So basically, quantum changes describe, the overview effect could be considered a quantum change. And there was this study out of a university, and they did a call in a newspaper for people who had experienced these quantum changes. So like one single experience that changed their life. And they heard back from, I think, a little more than 50 people in the area who all had different experiences, but all experienced this feeling of awe, and each of them had a sudden and enduring personal change. I lost my train of thought for a second. So each of them had totally different experiences, and each of them had a sense of well-being that lasted for decades afterwards. And so it's just interesting because we're all very different, and we all can experience these in the same way. And so why do we go into nature? Why do we go and look at ancient artifacts? It's because of the awe and the wonder that it inspires. And so if you were in the audience when Dylan Taylor first announced what we were doing, you would be familiar with that though we've been having this experience for almost 60 years, there's still less than 600 people who have actually been to space. And on average, it costs $50 million a person. And you're actually more likely to be a billionaire or to be a Nobel Prize winner than to go to space. And of those less than 600 people, they've been almost entirely Western men. And not that there's anything wrong with that demographic, it's just that this is not representative of the human population. However, as you all know, we are at the cusp of a new era in space exploration. And so starting this year, the launch costs to get someone into space when compared to sending someone to the International Space Station have decreased by 99.5%. And you all are familiar with the ways of getting there. So we have Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and Worldview. And then there are a few other companies that are in their beginning phases of working towards this as well. And so these advancements are incredibly exciting. However, the price for a ticket is $200,000, making access affordable only to the top 1% of the 1%. So this map actually shows the average income per capita. And so I think the numbers are around, for a household, it costs $9,500 US dollars, or a household makes $9,500 US dollars a year on average in the world. And an individual makes around $2,500 US dollars a year. So that means someone would essentially have to work their entire life in order to be able to afford something like this. And yeah. So this immediately begs the question, what about the rest of humanity? What would it be like if everybody had access to this experience? So Space for Humanity envisions a future where we actually can answer that question and give people from all around the world access to this experience. So we envision a future where we have diverse people from all around the world taking part in human spaceflight, each of them having ambassadorial duties. So each of them having a commitment to coming back down and sharing that experience with their communities, and each of them experiencing the overview effect and experiencing that planetary perspective, and whatever that may mean for each individual. So this is our timeline. So as of this morning, we actually reopened our applications. So we take applications on our website, and people can apply to our program. Our interviews begin in the winter when we close our applications. And by this time next year, we'll be choosing our first class of astronauts. We are planning to begin training them in fall of 2020. And so this is a physical and psychological training for the spaceflight itself. And then it's also a leadership training program. Because like I said before, we really believe that this perspective is essential for the next generation of leaders. And so it's our commitment to create that in our world. And on top of that, each person will be creating their own social impact program, and following their flight, they will carry it out for a year. And those social impact programs will be tied in with one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are, who here is familiar with the UN SDGs? Okay. It's always interesting to see who's familiar with what, because each audience has different interests. So the UN SDGs are 17 different goals, global issues that we're facing. So anything from poverty to equality for women and girls. They're saying 1 minute, but I'm just going to feed straight into the panel, so I'm going to go over a little bit. So anything from equality for women and girls to education for all, to preserving life on land or life below water. So each of our astronauts will create a program around one of these goals, specifically to forward these important global challenges in their local communities. And so when Dylan first announced what we were doing at NewSpace 2017, we actually had we opened our applications and we closed them just a few months ago. So these are a few of our past applicants. On the top left, her name is Dee Dee Wong, and she is an entrepreneur. She has 5 businesses. She has 4 kids. She's an artist and a dancer. And she's committed to creating equality for women and girls, and that's what she wants to use her flight to do. And then we have Steve Gleason, and he was in the NFL, and he was diagnosed with ALS in 2011. And he wants to use his trip to show people with ALS that anything is possible for them. And then the person in the bottom left is Oleg, and he has been a space fan since he was a little boy. He now runs a rocket company. And then this is Marie. And Marie is a cancer survivor. And she wants to be the first cancer survivor to go to space so that people who are going through their treatments can see that anything is possible for them. So these are 4 totally different people with 4 different stories and 4 different commitments to creating impact in their communities. And our first round of applicants had people from over 45 countries, people from all over the world. And these aren't just people who work in the space industry. These are people who work on the peripheries, and these are people who are totally unrelated. So they really represent the future of space, not only in talent, but also in ideas. And so our mission is really twofold. And that the first part is building a foundation for humanity's future in space. And actually, I saw Erica Wagner here before. I'm not sure if she's in the audience, but she was talking about how Blue Moon is working to build the foundation for the moon so that people can come in and they can build on top of what they're doing and they can bring in their ideas. And so I view what Space for Humanity is doing as something that's going to build the foundation for us to be able to bring in the support to the industry with people from all around the world. And so we're going to be building the foundation for humanity's future in space while also impacting our world today. And so that's why we're tying in our mission with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so that we can specifically forward important global missions that we're facing right now. So in short, this is not simply about sending people to space. This is about empowering people to make a difference in their communities. And I really believe that this program will seed the world with new ideas. Our history as a civilization up until this point has been defined by a lack of perspective. And we believe that space will fundamentally change that. And these are just people from our technical advisory board, which I'm sure some of you guys know. Amaresh is in the audience right now. We have Michael Lopez Alegria, who's a NASA astronaut on our strategic advisory board. And our founder, as I said, his name is Dylan Taylor. And he also founded Space Angels and a number of other space ventures. And if you guys are interested in our mission and interested in getting involved, there's a number of ways that you can do so. You can just share what we're doing with people. Share that this is actually something that's going to be possible in the next few years. And just by doing that, you're forwarding our mission. You can invite others to get involved and engaged. We welcome volunteers. You can also, as I said, apply on our website to our program. And if you're inspired by our mission, you can also invest in funding for our programs and our capacity building. Thank you.